The House may be out for the summer, but the Senate returns this week with a lot still up in the air. Appropriations are moving slowly, a continuing resolution looks likely, and talk of a shutdown is already starting. Meanwhile, redistricting is back in the spotlight. WTOP's Mitchell Miller joins me to break down what's ahead this week for Congress. Mitchell, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely.
Well, this Friday is August 1st, so it's the start of summer recess, right? Or not?
Well, why don't we say sort of?
Okay.
It's a bifurcated recess, to use a bureaucratic word. The House is technically off, although House Speaker Mike Johnson wants people to know that committee work has been continuing. But essentially, the House recess has begun early. But the Senate will be staying in session, and they're really trying to get a lot of these confirmation hearings wrapped up, as well as getting more nominees through. The Senate Republican leadership did point out that even though President Trump has indicated that he's not so happy that there's still some people left that need to be confirmed, that they have actually confirmed at least 100 people in his administration. So they have been moving on that. The House is actually, or the Senate rather, has actually been in session much more than the House throughout the year, and it has actually got quite a bit done. So Senate Majority Leader John Thune, proud of his start of his first tenure under this. And one of the nominees I should mention that we are going to be looking at, as we've talked about before, is Paul Ingracia, the nominee for the office of special counsel. He was supposed to come up for a confirmation earlier this week. However, it was canceled because they need more time with his confirmation. There are all kinds of red flags related to it, at least from the Democratic side. He has, for example, called for January 6th to be declared a national holiday in honor of the 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. He has made many controversial statements. Critics point out that he doesn't have really any experience in this area, where he would be, of course, defending and trying to help whistleblowers. Federal government employees know how important that is, and it's going to be a tough fight. I don't know if he's actually going to get across the finish line or not.
Well, it will be interesting to watch, and certainly the Senate's got their hands full, but neither the House or the Senate has really gotten very far on appropriations, right?
Absolutely not. There was a lot of talk, and this happens early at the outset of the summer, that we're going to pound those appropriations bills, get them all through. We're going to return to regular order. And, of course, it didn't happen. The House left with only 2 bills passed. That's actually not as good as they were doing the year before. And the Senate has been working on one major package, and they've been talking about trying to move a bunch together. But really, the bottom line is they are not going to get these appropriations done. It has only happened about 4 times on time over the last several decades. So we are going to be returning to those infamous 2 words, continuing resolution.
How much of a holdup in the appropriations process is the administration's promise to bring up another rescission package?
Well, that is a big roadblock, I think, because Democrats are still strategizing about what they're going to do in response to these rescissions packages. Obviously, the $9 billion one already got through, and the White House has indicated there is definitely another one rolling down the tracks. It looks like it's going to be focused on the Department of Education as well as education funding. We'll have to see how much it is. But this is something that appropriators, including some Republican appropriators, are a little bit uneasy about, because that's one of the few areas where there is bipartisan work that takes place every day, every week in Congress. I know that a lot of people find that hard to believe, but they have to reach agreements on these top-line figures and a variety of other funding levels. And without that trust within the appropriations process, Democrats say they just don't really feel like that they can go along. And that, in turn, has slowed down the confirmation process for getting nominees, because Democrats have said, we're just going to try to gum up the works as much as we can if we can't get any cooperation on these spending and appropriations levels.
I'm speaking with WTOP Capitol Hill correspondent Mitchell Miller. Well, speaking of gumming up the works, submitting a rescissions package in September, the end of a fiscal year, without appropriations and probably not a continuing resolution even for the following year, that's really got to be difficult for not only the committees but the agencies to know where they stand.
Right. I mean, every year that we come around with this continuing resolution, you can hear the howls of complaints from the Pentagon, for example, because they can't do all of these programs that have to really be lined out years in advance. And many of these agencies are kind of at a loss right now about what they can plan for. Many of them have been decimated, of course, by the loss of federal workers. They don't know exactly what the levels are going to be when we get into this new fiscal year. And then the fact that you have lawmakers just essentially gone for all of August and then trying to rush through to do something in September. As we've seen over the last few years, it just doesn't work. And it's going to be an even more intense situation with these aforementioned problems related to trust and what the Democrats are going to do with the Republicans in connection with these funding levels. So I think we're definitely going to have a shutdown showdown. Whether it turns out to be a shutdown, it's really, I think, going to be up to the Democrats in this case. We remember that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer got a lot of grief from a lot of people, particularly on the progressive side of the Democratic Party, for not standing up to Republicans the last time around. Will they take it up to the brink this time? We'll have to see, because on the flip side, a lot of people say, well, if you're a Republican, if the Democrats want to do this, we're going to blame the Democrats, and we're going to actually continue to cut into what we think as Republicans are much more wasteful programs.
Well, September's going to be full of some tricky conversations then.
Sure is.
Speaking of tricky conversations, the word redistricting is getting tossed around quite a bit. Texas has been in the news for talking about it, and now we're hearing New York and Florida and maybe even Maryland are looking at their maps. What are you hearing on the Hill?
Right. So this is not something that's just something that's talked about by political scientists and whether or not it's going to make a little bit of difference. This could have a profound impact, I believe, on the makeup of Congress, as well as programs that affect the federal government, federal agencies, and ultimately federal employees. Because if they start redistricting in between the census period, traditionally, they would start in 2030, for example. Texas is now taking this up right now in a special session. They want to flip, Republicans, about 5 district seats. They want to add 5 district seats for Republicans in the House. Of course, with the tenuous nature of the House and how close it is, that could make a huge difference. And if you actually go back to North Carolina a few years ago, they became a much more predominantly North Carolina Republican delegation. And a lot of people felt really tilted things toward the Republicans in this last midterm. So when you have these other states now, a lot of Democrats are saying, wait a second, if the Republicans in Texas are going to do this, then we're going to try to do it in our states, in our blue states. And even in recently, as you mentioned, Maryland, the Democratic House Majority Leader, he actually said, I think we'll do it in Maryland, even though Maryland only has 1 Republican in its congressional delegation. But that's the point where we are. So I think that if you have states now battling every few years over these districts, you're going to find gerrymandering is just going to be an even bigger issue than it has been over the years. And I really do think it's going to be a tit-for-tat kind of situation if this is the way we're going.
And are the governors coming into the conversation here?
It depends on the state. For example, in Texas, it's a very straightforward process, and Governor Abbott can basically call a quick session and just say, okay, we're going to vote on this and we're going to decide on redistricting. In other states, the state assemblies have more power and it's much more involved. Maryland happens to be one where they could do it a little more quickly as well. But for many of these other states, they may also be looking at how they change state laws, and maybe they want to try to get in on this political game and see if they can change things quicker. So this is something we should really keep a close eye on, because this could have a big, big impact, as I said, on Congress.
Well, as members are home over the recess, I imagine they'll be getting an earful, and it's not going to get any cooler while they're out there.
Absolutely not. There's going to be a lot of hot political talk back in those districts.
I've been speaking with WTOP Capitol Hill correspondent Mitchell Miller. Mitchell, thanks so much.
You bet.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.
What makes a great leader in government? Christine Harada joins WEPA CEO Shane Canfield to reflect on her journey from aerospace engineering to the White House. In this episode, she shares lessons on public-private collaboration, leading with purpose, and why service, not power, should guide leadership.
Hello, and welcome to the Lessons in Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA. Today, I'm joined by Christine Harada, former Senior Advisor at the Office